Standing, let us pray. O Lord, uphold thou me that I may uplift thee. And let the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. For a story announcing the good news that Christ has been raised from the dead, Mark's account of the resurrection is rather on the dark side, don't you think? It reminds me of a story about the late poet and literary critic T.S. Eliot. He was at a party, and a woman seated next to him at the table said, "Isn't the party wonderful?" To which Eliot replied, "Yes, it is, if you see the essential horror of it all." Of the four evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it's Mark who sees most clearly the essential horror of it all. Writing in the shadow of the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans, Mark is painfully aware of the depth of human perversity and denial in the face of the good news. Mark's gospel has been called a passion narrative with an extended introduction. In Mark, the cross casts its shadow across the land. He relentlessly portrays the disciples' failure to understand God's initiative in Christ. Mark's gospel is also the story of a young man's experience of a life transformed by the resurrection. So how do we come to Easter faith today? Mark's answer relies on a device that he shares with another storyteller who saw the essential horror of it all, Alfred Hitchcock. You remember the famous directory of mystery movies? He used to make a cameo appearance in each of his movies. One of the best parts of an Alfred Hitchcock movie is watching for the cameo. YouTube gives it all away. They're all in one YouTube. Well, that's what Mark does in his telling of the gospel story. We are so accustomed to the appearance of an angel in the tomb that we easily read right past what Mark actually says. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe. They were amazed. Where did this young man come from? If we turn back a few pages, we discover that this is not his first appearance. He first appears on the stage mysteriously at Jesus' arrest. The gospel says, a young man wearing nothing but a linen cloth was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving the linen cloth behind. Well, the word young man appears twice in Mark's gospel. The story of a young man frames the story of Jesus' passion. And I believe it is Mark's story. Furthermore, the word for linen cloth is the same word used to describe Jesus' burial shroud when Joseph of Arimathea removes his body from the cross. Mark's gospel is the story at this point of a follower of Jesus who swore that he was ready to die with Jesus and yet shamefully abandoned his Lord. He came to the garden prepared in a burial cloth. And then when they arrested him, he fled, leaving the burial cloth behind. Now, in the tomb, he has experienced the catharsis of forgiveness for his sin of abandoning his Lord. He appears at the tomb in his white baptismal robe, resplendent with the joy of new life, proclaiming the good news of Jesus' resurrection to the women at the tomb. What audacity! He put himself into Christ's tomb, announcing the resurrection. You might ask that, but where does he get the nerve? Wait a minute. What is an angel in the first place. In Greek, the word is angelos, and it simply means messenger. Anyone who bears the good news is an angel bearing the good news. And Mark certainly is a divinely inspired messenger to the women and to us. Mark titles his message, "The Beginning of the Gospel, Good News, of Jesus Christ, the Son of God." Mark delivers his message by telling his personal experience of resurrection, and he invites you and me to do the same. To understand Mark's message, we have to do more than read about it. After we've read the gospel, we know what Mark's message is, but now, how will we adopt it to our own life situation? Well, reading the Gospel of Mark is just the beginning of the Gospel's actualization in our lives. And we will be angelos and carry the message to others. Whoa. Should be. That's what Mark wants. The encounter with the risen Lord is a lived experience that often begins with feelings of dread. Mark's final words, "for they were afraid," strange as they are in English, are very strange in Greek. In Greek, it ends with the word gar, which means for. A word that's not normally used to end a sentence, let alone a paragraph, and much less a book. One commentator suggested it could be rendered, "for they were afraid," you see. This inconclusiveness suggests that the story is to be continued. The philosopher and statesman Francis Bacon said, "If a man will begin with certainties, he shall end in doubts. If he begins in doubts, he shall end in certainties." Mark tells us that the genuine journey in faith often begins in doubt. Certainly it is a product of the daily experience of crucifixion and resurrection that comes when we try to do Jesus' bidding, to take up our cross and follow him. Each of us has a cross. By the way, it's not Jesus' cross. Jesus carried his own cross. You have your cross. Something that stands between us and our ability to receive the kingdom of God as a gift and celebrate it with joy. It may be life's unfairness, maybe some injury or illness, whether to us or to someone we love. It may be a feeling that we have a smaller share of life's blessings than we really deserve. Whatever it is, health, money, sex, power, no matter how much we have, somehow there's never quite enough. We are convinced that all we really need is a little bit more, and then we'll be happy. Not a lot, just a little bit more. But the truth is, we will never find happiness by searching for happiness by itself. Our lives must have some larger purpose. We must pursue goals that are larger than ourselves. Most of us are afraid to take up our cross. Like the young man in his linen cloth, we think it will lead us to the grave. But life is at its deadliest when we spend it steering clear of graves. Our lives are racked with fear. Then all our decisions will be controlled by the need to avoid the disaster. Living with this kind of tension, we will soon be buried alive in despair, bitterness, and resignation. I love having children. People, the baby starts crying, they take the baby out. I say, bring him back. I can out-shout any baby that's ever been born. When H.L. Mencken was told that Calvin Coolidge was dead, he responded, "How can you tell?" How many of us die at 40 only to be buried at 80? The Bible teaches that God created us a little lower than the angels, and some of us have been getting lower and lower ever since. We are all born free children of God. You hear that, little baby? You are a free child of God. Yet all too many of us become buried as enslaved children of God, or gold, or of prestige, or our jobs, or families, or our debts. The message of Easter is that resurrection life begins in just these places of doubt and fear, the places in which we feel enslaved. To paraphrase the philosopher Nietzsche, resurrection only comes from graveyards. Resurrection begins in the midst of our worst problems. It's not about avoiding those problems. It's about the new life that comes from facing into our problems, certain that they will not determine our destiny. In all of the Gospels, it is the appearance of the risen Lord, first to the women and then to the disciples, that convinces them that Christ is alive. He is risen. The Lord is risen indeed. It's in this affirmation that our destiny is opened up beyond death and the grave. His saving work is an ever-present reality in the community of the believers. That's us here today. He's with us. Easter faith is grounded on the testimony of the first witnesses. We cannot take up our cross alone. We need the company of faithful witnesses who are themselves trying to be faithful to the gospel story. Well, can you find yourself in the gospel story? Where do you find yourself? Are you able to see the essential horror of it all? See, I told you. Are you refusing to take up your cross? Are you buried in your tomb? Has your stone been rolled away? Wherever they are, wherever you are, the rest of us need to hear it. We want to hear you. Witnesses, persons like Mark, who tell what it was like, what happened, and what's like now, are the power of the gospel for healing and new life in the Holy Spirit. I hope you have the audacity to fit your story into the gospel story, just as Mark did. For in doing so, together we find the abundant life that Jesus promised. Not somewhere in the sky by and by, but right here, today, right now, among our sisters and brothers in Christ. Some years ago, an ad appeared in the classified section of a Milwaukee paper. Big bold letters advertised, "Used tombstone." The text of the ad said, "Used tombstone for sale. Real bargain to someone named Dingo. For information, call, ... The Easter tidings of Christ's resurrection convey exactly the same message as that ad. The tomb is empty. Death has lost its sting. The stone has been rolled away. It is no longer needed. Hallelujah, Christ is risen.